There is no lore in Genshin Impact that manages to confuse me quite as much as the lore of the Primordial One. If you're not familiar with it, go read this book. This is Before Sun and Moon. It is the single most important text in the entirety of the game as of time of recording, and if you only ever read one book from this game, it should be this one. But for those of you too stubborn to go read this one book, here are the key points that you need to know for today's video. First, that the world was originally ruled by 7 elemental dragon kings. Second, that the Primordial One created 4 shades of itself and conquered said world with them. And third, that the Primordial One and one of its shades created all life on Earth once the dragon kings were dealt with. Yes, there is more in this book. No, I probably won't talk about it at length. That's a discussion for another day. Something odd about the whole existence of the Primordial One is that you don't actually find out it exists until you get to Enkanomiya, which is like 3 Archon quests in. It's a long ways into the game, you know? You'd think that if this was some almighty god that's ruling over the entirety of Teyvat, that, you know, it would be more prevalent. We'd have more instances of it, but we just don't. Instead, we only have instances of Celestia, which, to be fair, is not a person, but a location. Or maybe you could also call it like an organization? Well, whatever it is, Celestia is what currently rules over Teyvat. Now, some very popular theories involve the idea that there is an imposter inside of Celestia. So the original god, or in this case, the Primordial One, is not the one who is ruling inside of Celestia right now, but instead, you know, a series of imposters or invaders, or in some cases known as the Second Who Came, or the Second Throne. For the purposes of this video in particular, I am going to be assuming that the Primordial One is the one who originally established Celestia as, like, you know, the Mount Olympus of Teyvat, so to speak, and that it is still the god that's inside of it ruling, or at least technically. Like, I'm assuming there are no imposters, basically. And part of the reason for that is because I want to stay on topic and I don't really want to spend too much time going into all these other possibilities, but also because the Flower of Paradise Lost set has the Goddess of Flowers suggesting that the Primordial One did successfully manage to drive back the invaders, which means that they shouldn't have managed to take over Celestia to begin with. So I'm assuming, providing nothing happened to the Primordial One, that it should still be up there, in theory, or at least there's no one else up there. Anyway, back to the book for a second. One of the most important lines within it reads, "The Primordial One may have been Phanes." Then the book goes on to say that the Primordial One had wings and a crown, was birthed from an egg, and was androgynous. Now, all of these things match the description of the Orphic god by the same name. Phanes had wings and well, they had a horned helmet instead of a crown, but it counts, right? And they were considered androgynous in nature, even though they were mostly depicted with a male physique, so that also checks out. So that kind of settles it, right? Phanes must be the Primordial One, that's its name. But I've always gotten really hung up on the whole may have been thing. The fact that the scribe of Istaroth herself, the god of time of all things, is uncertain about the actual identity and name of the Primordial One really irks me. It bothers me on so many levels, and then I get to thinking, well, what if the Primordial One isn't Phanes? And if it's not Phanes, then who is it? And that is actually the whole point of today's video. It's the reason why I'm making it. It only took me 4 minutes to get here, so without further ado, let's take a closer look at the Primordial One's shades and see if we can get them to shed a little light on the Primordial One's identity, whether Phanes or not Phanes. By all accounts, the best candidates for the Primordial Shades are the 3 moon goddesses Aria, Sonnet, and Canon, which I know only numbers 3, but lore from sources like the Staff of the Scarlet Sands seems to suggest that the sun was created around the same time as all 3 moons. So if the moon goddesses are really good candidates for shades, and the sun was made in very close timing to the moon goddesses themselves, then the sun is also a very good candidate for one of the shades, right? Now, assuming that the 4 shades are the 3 moon goddesses and a sun god, the idea that Phanes is the Primordial One starts to fall apart a little bit. You see, the Orphic god, Phanes, is supposed to have had a body made purely of light, which makes them a perfect candidate for a sun god. And as you may recall from our introductory bullet points, one of the Primordial One's shades was responsible for creating all life on Earth. Well, guess what? The light of the sun is literally the lifeblood of a planet. And Phanes themselves was considered a god of creation in Orphic mythology, which means in spite of being a creation god, they are a shade of the Primordial One and not really the Primordial One itself, or so the evidence seems to suggest, which means the Primordial One has to be someone else, or the sun isn't a shade at all and there's another unnamed character that exists alongside the Moon Sisters. It's one of the two. We'll explore both options a little bit. So okay, we need a god that is more powerful than a creator god. And if we go back to Orphic mythology to find some clues as to potential candidates, we end up with one perfect one. Her name is Nyx, the goddess of night. Now, Nyx is fascinating because in traditional Greek myth, she is one of the primordial gods. She was born of chaos, also known as the void or the abyss, and she was so powerful that even Zeus did not dare to challenge her. Now, night is a perfect complementary shade candidate to three moons, right? So if you were to be in the camp that Phanes was the primordial one, then you could assume that his four shadows, in this case, would be three moons and then the night itself. They're complementary, it makes sense. But this is where things get more interesting. You see, in Orphic mythos, which is different from regular Greek mythos, it's like a different sect, okay? Nyx was not only a primordial god in Orphic mythology, she was considered the goddess to be born at the beginning of time itself. She was born from time itself, and she is considered the parent of all life. And, get ready for this one, she can be either the mother, sister, wife, or child of Phanes. Now remember, Phanes was the god of creation. When they hatched from the cosmic egg, all of life began to propagate throughout the universe. But Nyx was said to have come before that because she is, remember, the parent of all life. So if Phanes was the start of all life, then Nyx really should be the mother of Phanes. So hold on to that idea of Nyx being the parent of all life for a minute. You know how we just got that lore on the Hexen Circle, Genshin's Witch Club, and how one of the witches was named Anders' daughter, and she was best known for writing The Boar Princess, and how it is speculated that she also wrote The Pale Princess and the Six Pygmies for reasons you can learn more about in my deep dive video on the topic, link in the description. You remember that? Well, The Pale Princess and the Six Pygmies was a book that we helped Lisa recover from an abyss mage who claimed it contained a secret. And for the longest time, I thought the secret was about the role of the Pale Princess and the Prince of Light, for which the book is named. But now I think the secret is actually about the character known as the Night Mother. Because Nyx is the primordial goddess of night, and she's known as the parent of all life. That makes her a Night Mother. And as much as I would like to go into the book and try to tell you all the little reasons why this is so fascinating, that's really all I can say about this book right now since we only have the first volume and the rest is still leaked material. But fun fact, just like Phanes, Nyx was said to have both wings and a crown, or rather, a halo of dark clouds around her head. But a halo is really just a non-physical crown, right? Wings and a crown, she fits the description of the primordial one, minus the androgyny a little bit. But the three Moon Sisters, Arya, Sonnet, and Kennen, who are heavily implied to be three of the four primordial shades, have a lot in common with the Greek Moirai, who were also known as the Greek Fates. Well, guess who birthed the Fates? It was Nyx. Nyx is the mother of fate itself, and in some sources, she is also the mother of Phanes, right? So now, Night Mother birthed a sun god, a god of light, and birthed three fates, gods of the moon. All right, that's all well and good. I get it. There's, some great little mythological connections there. But what about that whole egg thing, right? The primordial one was said to have been born from an egg. Well, no matter what Orphic myth you look at, the character that kicks off the creation of life is always Phanes. And therein lies the paradox. See, human life especially wasn't created until after the Dragon Kings had been subjugated, right? So the only way that Phanes could be the primordial one here is if they actually created the shades while they were still inside of the shell of the cosmic egg, and the shades did all the fighting for them. And that doesn't seem very plausible. That just doesn't seem very realistic. It seems more realistic that the primordial one and 3 shades fought the Dragon Kings, and the 4th shade was incubating life all at the time, and then eventually the egg would crack, and then humans would come out, and so would birds and oceans and trees and flowers and all that kind of stuff. But okay, you might be wondering why a goddess of night would create a shade that is technically a being of light. How does that make sense? I get the moons, but how does a sun god make sense? Where Genshin is concerned, the Dragon Kings lived in a place known as the Light or Elemental Realm, right? So if you have this primordial one, who's this goddess of darkness, and she's the goddess of night, right? It's very feasible to assume that she would have defeated these Light Kings, then used fragments of the Light Realm to infuse it into her cosmic egg for creationary purposes, thus making a sun god. Now, this actually has some mythological merit to it, believe it or not, because Nyx, in Orphic myth, was also the mother of Hemera, the goddess of day, and Ether, a god of upper air or radiance, also known as light, and in some tales, she's even the mother of Eos, the goddess of dawn. That's 3 light beings coming from a goddess of night. And yes, I did say Ether, and yes, it is the same Ether as one of the twins. And before you go, this is Lumine Erasure. Please note that there is a theory about waves of light that goes by the name luminiferous ether, which is likely how both twins got their names in English, at the very least. In other languages, their names are sky and glow, or like luminescence, which still works here because the concept of luminiferous ether is that ether is the space through which the light travels, so sky and light or glow still works here. Now, what are 3 things that you associate with nighttime? How about sleep, dreams, and nightmares? Those are all things that happen at night, right? Well, it just so happens that Nyx mothered Hypnos, the god of sleep, and Onori, the god of dreams, and Momos, the god of nightmares. Well, technically, those are groups of gods, but whatever. It's more the fact that she has sleep, dreams, and nightmares as like her children, and we've got dreams in my Genshin Impact. Dreams are a massive source of power in Genshin. Rukkhadevata and Deshret both created hive mind systems, the Akasha and the Golden Slumber, and both of them were built on this foundation of dreams, and dreams themselves are heavily associated with Khaenri'ah and, quote, those who dream of dreaming. Now, visions are even said to be manifestations of one's ambitions, but it is also said that they could be manifestations of both hopes and dreams. Let's go back to the egg for a second, that cosmic one that Phanes came out of. In the Battle Pass cutscene, we are shown this black snake guarding the Genesis Pearl, and if you think about it, eggs are mostly pearl-shaped and colored, and Genesis means beginning, so an egg could easily be a Genesis Pearl. If you think about it, you want to get all poetic and nice and all that kind of stuff. And Phanes, as a deity, is often depicted with a serpent coiled around them, sometimes guarding an egg, which is supposed to represent the egg that they came from. This snake is thought to be their mother, which should make it either Nyx or Ananke. Now, Ananke is a primordial god of fate or inevitability in some cases, like in some tellings, who is also said to be the mother of the Morai in some myths. So I think for Genshin purposes, we can probably equate Nyx with Ananke here. Now, in the Orphica Epicurus fragment, this snake here presumably squeezed the cosmic egg until it divided the world into 2 hemispheres. In other words, it separated the earth from the heavens, just like how, and before Sun and Moon, the primordial one used the eggshell to separate the universe, so heaven, from the microcosm of the world, so earth. Now, before Sun and Moon attributes this action of separating heaven and earth to both Phanes and the primordial one, as it's kind of assumed here by the scribe that they are the same, but you could look at it like this. That the primordial one opened the egg, and because Phanes was inside, the heavens were then separated from the earth, right? Therefore, the creation of the world is attributed to both of them. Am I reaching? Maybe, but let me reach some more because I hate segues and I have one more thing to add. When it comes to non-elemental energy, Genshin is pretty specific about its color theory. It is either blue, gold, or in the case of anything abyssal, a weird magenta-y purple color, but we don't really care about the magenta. I've got a whole video on that if you're really interested in my take on the color of magenta. We're just going to focus on blue and gold. The color gold seems to be heavily associated with the power of light, and that's often a power that's used by either Twin in the opening cutscene or by the Traveler throughout many cutscenes throughout the game. And it's also the color of like Mora ley lines and the activated Irminsul branches and domains. Blue, on the other hand, is the power of something we're not really sure of. But Dainsleif seems to use something within its color palette, and so does the Abyss Twin. It's also the color of experience-based ley lines and the inactive Irminsul tree. Now, in fact, almost all ley lines that are not around an elemental creature like a Regisvine have either veins of gold or blue. There are very few instances of it being anything else, and most of the time, it's blue. Now, if you go into most domains and you go behind the Irminsul branch, you'll see this big mural-like tablet thing, right? And you'll notice that the reliefs and the symbols on this tablet are in gold, but the glowing energy behind it is blue. Now, if we were to assume that gold and the power of light is like the ultimate power into that, then Phanes should be the primordial one, right? And that means that every heavenly power should theoretically be gold, except the only heavenly power we've actually witnessed are the celestial nails. And those are not gold, they are blue. Celestial nails are blue crystal nails, which implies that the power of heaven is not gold, but blue. So what if blue is the color of night's power and gold is the color of day's power? That implies that the heavenly power that's guarding everything right now is not day, but night. It's not light, but darkness. But I need to stop talking about this, or else I'm going to go really off topic and start talking about things like how Venti looks a lot like Orpheus and how he might actually be a representation of the bard that told all of the Orphic myths, but that's not really relevant now, is it? Anyway, the TLDR of this entire video is that I am seriously convinced that either Nyx is the Night Mother and the Primordial One, or that Nyx is a missing fourth shade alongside the Moon Sisters, although I am heavily leaning in favor of the former rather than the latter. Just makes more sense to me. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and thanks to you, all lovely channel members that are on screen right now for a really short period of time, because this is a very short credit sequence, for supporting the channel. I appreciate you all, I really do. But now that I've gotten this out of my system, and there's going to be no more Genesis talk until I release that final Colony to Vat finale video thing. Oh my god, it'll be in version 3.6. I promise. I'm going. I'm waiting for something really specific, okay? I'm going. Bye. See ya.